Hallo, herzlich willkommen zu der Veranstaltung von Welche Wege mit dem Thema Ökologische Stadtentwicklung, der Weg zu gerechten, so sozial gerechten und klimaneutralen Städten am Beispiel Indonesiens. Mein Name ist Anastasia Blinzerf. Ich darf heute ein bisschen durch den Tag moderieren, durch die nächsten 3 Stunden, die wir haben, um dieses große Thema sowohl aus einer Perspektive aus Jakarta als auch Perspektiven aus Berlin zu besprechen, mit Expertinnen zu diskutieren und dann natürlich auch mit Ihnen und euch im Publikum zu diskutieren. Ich bin zum Glück nicht die einzige Person, die heute sprechen wird und genau habe ich die Ehre, unsere Expertinnen vorzustellen und so ein bisschen durch ihre Beiträge zu führen. Und das würde ich gerne erstmal machen und danach ganz kurz in das Thema einführen und dann abgeben an Janti, die auch nochmal eine kurze Begrüßungsworte sagen wird. Oder möchtest du zuerst, Janti? Okay. Danke. Genau, mit dabei haben wir heute Elisa Sutanunjaya. Elisa ist aus Jakarta per Zoom digital zugeschaltet für unsere Diskussion hier in Berlin. Und Elisa ist Architektin, Mitbegründerin und Geschäftsführerin der Denkfabrik Rujak Center for Urban Studies. Dieses Center oder Zentrum ist ebenfalls in Jakarta und in diesem Zentrum arbeiten Elisa und andere mit Communities und Nachbarinnenschaften, um Wissen und Praktiken zu verbreitern, die eine nachhaltige und gerechte Städte schaffen. Und Elisa ist außerdem Eisenhower Fellow. Außerdem, genau, und Elisa wird uns einen kleinen Impulsvortrag stellen in wenigen Minuten zum Thema ökologische Stadtentwicklung in Indonesien, zivilgesellschaftliche Perspektiven und Maßnahmen. Außerdem ist mit dabei zu meiner Linken Johannes Rupp. Johannes ist wissenschaftlicher Mitarbeiter am Institut für ökologische Wirtschaftsforschung, das IÖW. Und seit 10 Jahren arbeitet Johannes dort zu Energie- und Klimathemen und darin eben auch zum Thema Klimaschutz und Klimaanpassung in Städten. Das IÖW ist ein privates, unabhängiges Forschungsinstitut, das sich bereits seit 1985 mit Fragen der sozial-ökologischen Transformation befasst. Und Johannes wird uns außerdem auch einen kleinen Impulsvortrag später bieten zu dem Thema städtisches Wachstum, Klimawandel und Multikodierung. Genau, was Multikodierung ist, werden wir dann auch erfahren. Vielen Dank, Johannes. Und außerdem diskutieren noch 2 weitere Personen mit, die genau keine Impulsvorträge mitgebracht haben, aber trotzdem sehr viel Expertise. Das sind unter anderem Almut Schauber. Almut ist ebenfalls per Zoom zugeschaltet zu dieser Diskussion in Berlin und ist Politikwissenschaftlerin und arbeitet bei Miserior als Referentin für urbane Transformation und urbane Klimapolitik. Und ihre Aufgabe ist es unter anderem, die Partnerinnenorganisationen von Miserior zu begleiten und da die Verknüpfung zu politischem Handeln im globalen Norden herzustellen. Also genau diese Frage, die wir heute auch mitstellen, wie können Nachbarinnenschaften und Communities in Jakarta auch von Berlin aus unterstützt werden. Und aktuell arbeitet Almut an der Schnittstelle von städtischer Armut und urbaner Klimapolitik, unter anderem mit dem Ziel, die Rolle nichtstaatlicher Akteure zu stärken. Und außerdem haben wir noch dabei Hans-Ulrich Furke zu meiner Rechten. Hans-Ulrich ist Architekt und Stadtplaner und hat unter anderem auch mit einem Beitrag im Themenheft zu urbaner Transformation in Jakarta und Berlin von What Indonesia jetzt 2022 erschienen, mit einem Beitrag dazu beigetragen, genau Gemeinsamkeiten und Unterschiede von Berlin und Jakarta zu beleuchten, vor allen Dingen im Hinblick auf den Umgang mit dem Klimawandel. Herzlich willkommen an die Gäste hier vor Ort und herzlich willkommen natürlich auch an die Gäste, die uns per Zoom zugeschaltet sind. Ich werde, glaube ich, würde gerne an Janti kurz abgeben, dann kannst du noch einmal in die Veranstaltung von der Perspektive von Watch Indonesia einführen.
Danke, Anastasia, für Moderator. Well, I will give some speech today, but in English, so that the people maybe from Indonesia also can understand and doesn't need to there is no need to translate again. So, welcome to the panel discussion by Watch Indonesia. This event is an integral project, part of our project, Shaping Urban Transformation Socially and Globally Just, Civil Society Action Option for Climate Neutral Cities, using Indonesia as an example. I am Janti, like Anisha already told you, and I'm coordinate or manage the project. And if people say it about city or villages, I always say that I'm a city person, but because I just haven't grown up in a metropolis and spent most of my life in urban areas. However, I cannot comprehensively explain about how my hometown Jakarta was planned and built. So what I know, like annual floods, excessive traffic, slums, heaps or garbage, polluted rivers, air pollution, and significant social inequality in terms of prosperity, all seems normal for me, nothing special. It is understandable that a coveted metropolis like Jakarta has its dark sides. It is like a tribute to the hope for a better life. Until now, I never had question about the root causes. In the preface of his book, Rebel Cities, David Harvey emphasizes that the traditional city fell victim to unbridled capitalist development. An endless pursuit of over-accumulated capital led to a destructive development that disregarded social, ecological, and political consequences. Cities were primarily built for economic promotion, attracting people who saw no prospect in their hometowns or rural areas. This resulted in excessive needs of resources and energies, coupled with massive waste production in the city. And then it is hardly surprising that urban growth is now considered as a major cause of climate change. And in Indonesia, especially, rapid urbanization not only affects the climate, but also the social structures, especially for the middle and lower classes. The cost of living is rising, jobs are becoming more insecure, and these people are increasingly becoming victims of climate disaster. It is not in our hands who living here in this era to change the past and regret what should have been done. Instead, it is now crucial to act now and seek solution. The required measures should not focus not only on climate protection, but also on social justice. In this global era, the approaches offered must not only suffice for local problems, which in turn lead to problems in other states. Therefore, we need strategies that are equally beneficial for all countries. And today's panels provides a platform to understand different perspectives and learn from each other. I encourage you to actively participate in the discussion, exchange ideas, and collectively search for solutions. Each of us can contribute, whether through conscientious consumption, community engagement, or support for initiative advocating for a sustainable future. In this spirit, I sincerely thank all of you for your participation and the funding institution for their support, making this panel discussion possible. I look forward for enlightening and constructive discussion. May our dialogue today make a positive contribution to a sustainable and just urban transformation. Thank you and have fun.
Vielen Dank, Janti. Genau, die Fragen, die du jetzt aufgeworfen hast, sind natürlich auch welche, die wir, wie du sagst, sowohl aus Berliner Perspektive als auch aus Perspektive aus Jakarta oder Indonesien besprechen wollen. Und da hast du ganz konkret und ganz zentral auch die Frage sowohl der ökologischen Gerechtigkeit als auch eben der sozialen Gerechtigkeit aufgemacht. Also wer von der Klimakrise am härtesten betroffen ist und wo am schnellsten und als erstes sozusagen angesetzt werden muss. Und dazu wird Elisa unter anderem auch sprechen in dem Vortrag zur ökologischen Stadtentwicklung in Indonesien. Und ich würde Elisa Sutanujaya bitten, einmal in das Panel zu kommen.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry, I cannot speak German, so I didn't know whether you're calling me or not.
Sorry. Yes. So if you like, you can start with your presentation on the ecological city development in Indonesia.
Okay. So I will share my screen here. Again, thank you, Watch Indonesia, for inviting me to this important discussion. And I'm happy that Indonesia become one of the case study here. So I hope you can see the slide now. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Google Docs document.
Yeah, so as I already mentioned in the, I think you already mentioned in the CV earlier. So I come from Jakarta, the largest cities in Indonesia with a population of 10.6 million people. And Janti already mentioned that Jakarta widely known for traffic jam, recent air pollution, and also for urban poor, probably forced eviction. But Indonesia is also a country where 69% of the housing is provided by the people. And Jakarta actually is only one of the 96 cities in Indonesia. So here are some stats and figure about Indonesian cities in order for you maybe to understand a bit about Indonesian cities within like 15 minutes. So yeah, we already passed the threshold about numbers of people who live in urban area in 2010. Meaning now almost 90% of the population live in the cities. That's not including live in the urban area in the region. So it must be more than 115.9 million. And again, Jakarta is only one of the cities, and the total of the cities like actually 98, or because Jakarta divided into 5 different cities. And then we have 10 metropolitan region, which is mostly located in Java Island, while the Java Island only one-third of German land area. So you can imagine how dense it is. And then we have quite like most of the cities actually is secondary cities. So, but part for the budgeting and as well as the planning paradigm, actually it's very difficult to find any interest on secondary cities with either within the government planning or the even the civil societies. And then actually a few weeks ago, I think last week, we have this discussion between several CSO activists from Indonesia that mostly working in the urban area from the issues of water, urban poor, myself, which is hosted by What's Indonesia. And actually there are plenty of takeaways that coming from discussion, from the water issue to environmental issue, extractive. But if I try to pick some of the takeaways that related to the issues that we have today, there are several, which is, for example, the uneven urbanization process, of course, lead to environmental degradation, mostly in the peripheral area, and more extraction, induce more extraction in rural, and also resource risk, and also conservation area region. And again, the investment-driven development, which is also example of the neoliberal cities, also lead to many forced eviction in cities, especially towards urban poor. And again, there are so many ideas about there are too much idea about Jakarta centrist development, which is shift in attention from the small and secondary cities in Indonesia. And part of the discussion also, we discuss a lot about urban kampung, or what we call as a kampung kota, since this kampung kota is a typical form of settlement that we call it part of the duality that happened in the Indonesia urban area, where Indonesia urban area, no matter which city are you from, actually consists of two different settlements, which is informal settlements, or what we call as kampung, or the formal one. So in this map, it's indicating even during colonial time. I use the map from Jakarta or Batavia in this case. The red one is actually the formal one, while the green one is actually the kampung or the informal one, which is which is also exists until today. So, in this presentation, I will focus more on the kampung kota and how kampung kota also shapes the transformation in cities, and also how they driven and initiate many changes that coming from the communities from the ground. So to give you brief information about what is kampung. So it's a socially produced non-market settlement, high density settlement that located in the strategic area. And many scholars try to make sense of it. But I personally like the term that using by Abidin Kusno, he's a sociologist. He used the term as a de facto and irregular settlement when describing kampung kota. Internationally, is also addressed as social production of habitat, which is mostly used by Latin America activists or scholars. But however, for the government, kampung kota is also equal or considered as slums. So again, kampung kota already exists since colonial time, and as indicating in the previous slides. I also want to inform about the benefit of kampung in relation in space production, and especially the coming from the urban poor, for the urban poor, and by the urban poor, and as well as the migrant within the context of Indonesian cities. So in kampung, usually you can easily find affordable housing. Of course, the condition of housing sometimes follow the cost that you the cost of the housing as well. But the kampung also offer the social cohesion. If you want to see the example of commoning practice that's also happened in kampung, there is also a lot of popular economic activities or diverse economic activities by the people, and they also provide safety net if some government unable to provide safety net for the urban poor. And kampung usually located on the central area, so it's easy if you want to connect the kampung to the economic activities, as in this case the formal area, through the public transportation system as well. So, but kampung also have some challenge in the modern era. The challenge actually happened from the colonial times until today. So, for example, the narrative of modernization usually always come from the top down, and they always only see kampung as unfit for Indonesian cities, so it's not modern enough. At the same time, kampung also also serve as attractive sites for modernization project, for example, for building canals, or building new apartment towers, or building shopping malls, and also profitable site for investment, because regarding the context of the location of kampung itself. There are also a lot of recent talk about kampungs loaded with prejudice and stigma. And they always try to and it's related to the condition which is the slums, and sometimes it represent them in the derogatory way, as characterized by filth, dirt, malicious, and environmentally destructive. So about 40% of kampung, about like in Jakarta, for example, but 40% of kampung land status sometimes unregistered, so also make the kampung prone to agrarian conflict. So it's and easily claimed by private and government, then lead to the eviction. And for the case of, for example, in Jakarta, kampung is always on the margin on the perspective of land use and zoning regulation. The system is easily ignored and considered as empty land, as represented from the mismatch between kampung, for example, like here in this picture. The left side actually the mapping that coming from the community, while the right side is actually planning by the government. As you can see, many of the houses is located in the sea, in the blue area. So, I've already said, kampung provide affordable housing, especially for migrants who first come to big cities like Jakarta or Surabaya or Makassar, from students to blue collars worker, which is mated to population density. But somehow, if we look into land use regulation, in kampung, the floor area ratio intention in kampung usually less than 2, so it become overcrowded by design. So for them actually it's very difficult to build more than four stories. First, probably because of the cost, but also the planning regulation doesn't allow them to build higher than it used to be. And despite Indonesia already acknowledged right to adequate housing through our constitution and also ratified the International Convention on Social, Economic, and Cultural Rights back in 2005. So eviction is part of big cities, especially like cities like Jakarta. For example, like this one, it's the eviction that happened in Kampung Aquarium back in 2016, and even in 2015 to 2016, there are 305 forced eviction happened in Jakarta alone. So and how the urban poor resist actually resist toward eviction actually also shape the urban transformation that happened in Indonesia as well. So this is the list of resistance by the urban poor and its network that we made together. That Rujak made together, and we try to identify the strategy and make sense of it. So for example, we try to articulating how the urban food network respond towards forced eviction, which include the everyday practice, organizing, and tactics of residents deployed by various groups, and how this practice also reproduce people involvement in claiming their housing right. The tactics are pretty diverse, as you can see from here, from legal battle to cultural activities, from knowledge co-production to building alliance. So the first tactic actually is quite simple. So after eviction, if you happen to there's eviction happen in your place, usually the first tactic that coming from the urban poor is holding our ground, which is continuing to live or return to the kampung and rebuilding the kampung despite having already been demolished. For example, again in Kampung Aquarium, some residents return to their kampung and rebuild their life from scratch a month after forced eviction. So because of these tactics, Kampung Aquarium managed to maintain their community ties, the gotong royong, that's our, maybe we can translate it into mutual cooperation. And also it makes us easier to organize since they're already living in one place. So the next one is called preemptive transformation, which is about making change or that may prevent potential eviction. This comes in many different forms, but mostly is a form of insurgent planning. So, and another tactics actually about interkampung networking has been important for creating solidarities and ties and providing moral and material support between kampungs. And for example, in this case of Jakarta Urban Poor Network, there are coalition not only within themselves, within the kampung itself, but also with other organizations, including like us. So the kampung itself also create external partnership, building coalition and collaboration with an NGO, sometimes political party and religious organizations or organization who oppose each other. The nature of this partnership sometimes pragmatic, and the collaboration and partners are diverse again. And even for the case of Kampung Aquarium, you will see the infamous ultra-conservative Muslim group called FPI, together with Jakarta Legal Aid, with political party Gerindra, with Rujak, with UPC under the same network, even though the network itself sometimes not connected with each other. So we also do a multi-layer policy advocacy, meaning sometimes on the international level, regional and local level. For example, we just invite UN Special Rapporteur on right to adequate housing in September 2016, which gained international exposure in her report as well as the national media coverage. And we also have we call a strategy called legitimation, which is encompass Paris strategy, but in specifically concerned with raising awareness and recognition, not directly vis-a-vis the state, but also looking outwards and using indirect channels of soft power. For example, using the power of documentary, and as well as art activities that also located in many kampungs. So for the case of Jakarta, this collective of resistance and emerging insurgent acts also create movement and momentum, and sometimes in accordance to the local and national political agenda that happen in certain time. For this case, before the gubernatorial election in 2016 and 2017. So this is the time where urban poor, or we call it as orang cilik, affected by government mid-local election cycle, which incentivizes the urban poor to organize and to resist. So so there are several resistance that also happening in organized resistance that also happening prior to the governor election. But one resistance that I took part is actually the red one, which is a network and also resistant by Jakarta Urban Poor Network together with Urban Poor Consortium. And the network itself heavily concentrated in North Jakarta with some prints in West and East Jakarta. And this is actually produced what they call as a political contract between one of the candidates. And this is not actually the first political contract conducted by Jakarta Urban Poor Network. The first political contract actually happened in 2012 with Jokowi, the current president, former governor of Jakarta in 2012. Unfortunately, none of the contract fulfilled by Jokowi at the time before he left his post for presidency. But we learned a lot from our past mistake and made more thorough contract together with him, which is his name is Anies Baswedan. And the political contract was signed like 3 days before 2017 election day. So and at the end of the day, he won the election, and the urban poor have more active and friendly role within the city hall, which is unprecedented. So within the first 3 months of Anies governorship, there are several progressive policy implemented advocated by the urban poor, such as the construction of temporary shelter for Kampung Aquarium and the launching of citywide community action planning, as you see in the slides. So the community action planning program actually originally was a Jakarta Urban Poor Network event, but then it was fully adopted by the provincial government as official event. So starting from the political contract with 25 kampungs organized by Jakarta Urban Poor Network, now the community action program has benefit 220 neighborhoods citywide until 2022. So by having the political contract, urban poor and kampung residents have a once-in-a-lifetime chance to address and overcome challenges facing by the kampungs and also by the urban poor. The program putting people at the center of the planning, rather as a top-down typical spatial planning practice. So in 2010, the provincial government also agreed to launch urban agrarian reform program, which is trying to solve agrarian uncertainty in kampung. So combined with Kampung Susun and Vertical Kampung, the agrarian reform is trying to modernize and densify the kampungs properly, and it is a residence-led process. So I will explain a bit through two transformative projects in different setting and also in the different planning decision. So the first one is the Kampung upgrading project with emphasis on the issues of climate change and is located on one of the dense kampung in Jakarta, North Jakarta. This is also a co-op base, and residents also chip in some money before they taking part on the project. So actually, we start with one or two households and then followed by the neighbors. And this is the climate related housing upgrading project. So this is the design guideline, especially on adaptation due to urban heat and in order to provide better air circulation for residents. And this is also necessary because when we design this, it happened during the pandemic era, so it become also put important how project is important for the kampung and how to modernize the kampung in pandemic times. And at the same time, we also try to introduce and provide better economic space for the residents, which is located on the ground floor. We call it mixed multi-purpose terrace and multi-purpose room. So yeah, we start with one of two households and then followed by the neighborhoods into total like 10 houses. And it's still ongoing. We're still trying to find more houses, starting with one alley and then following to another alley and so on. And this is the before condition, which is this area is again very dense and also have the problem of land subsidence. As you can see, the doors is actually lower than the street. So and you can see there some second floors also on the top of the public area or the alleyway. Every time you pass this area, sometimes you have to bend your body because it's too low. And this is the before and this is the co-design process that happening during pandemic. And the committee decide on the design guideline. And this is the construction process, and they decide on who's going to start who's going to get the contract for the construction, and everything is made and the decision also through the cooperative as well. And this is the final after this the result. So as you can see, in all houses we put some void become a light well, as well as to become we call it as a pathway for wind and also air circulation. So as you can see, on the background of the first picture, actually you can see the before some of the houses that haven't been taking part of the project, while the foreground, as you can see, the two houses that already participate in the project. So and because of that, residents also said that they happy with the breeze, because before there is no air circulation and the condition is very damp, and now they feel more healthy and become more active, and also can also put some plants on the alleyways. So another project called Kampung Aquarium, which is effected in 2016, that I already mentioned in the prior slides. The project itself is a rebuilding process as a result of the political contract in the form of we call as Kampung Susun or vertical kampung. So this is also a house co-op base as well, and is funding. The funding is coming through infrastructure levy which is coming from the developers, and some grants which is the one that become our operation for our operation costs, and also coming from resident contribution as well as the philanthropy. So we also see Kampung Susun or the vertical kampung itself as a form of design and planning resistance against a top-down one-size-fits-all housing solution for urban poor, which is usually only in the form of public rental flat. But for the kampung, Susun itself is designated to adopt kampung lifestyle and its economic activity, and this is also a community-led process. So within 5 years after the eviction from 2016 to 2021, Kampung Aquarium has undergone tremendous change from ruination after post-eviction through Shelter Life in 2018 and then Kampung Susun in 2021. And now we have 4 blocks in 2022. So while public housing design tends to be a top-down approach without residents' involvement, Kampung Susun has a robust co-design process. It looks messy somehow in the process, but it saves time after we finalize the building. It serves as a conflict resolution among residents and rebuild sense of community after being demolished through forced eviction. So the provincial government also actively participate with the design process. So this process also serves as a middle ground between the government and the residents. And the making of Kampung Susun is also very democratic and inclusive. For example, when they designated unit is not based by lottery or money, it is based on your health condition and age. So on the ground floor units is designated for people with health problem and old people. And Kampung Susun Aquarium also an equitable example of public-private partnership, which is led by the residents, built through infrastructure levy from the developers, and shaping some new progressive policy in urban governance, such as urban agrarian reform and cooperative housing. And 2 weeks ago, Kampung Susun Aquarium just won an Asia Pacific Housing Innovation Award. So Kampung Susun Aquarium practice also continue and become a model for other 3 affected kampungs in rebuilding, which is Kampung Susun Kunir in West Jakarta, Kampung Susun Cakung in East Jakarta or formerly Bukit Duri residence, and lastly Kampung Susun Bayam. So, and again, Kampung Susun also involve a process of commoning where the building is managed and operated by residents through housing co-op. The land is still belong to the public, but the building ownership will be transferred to housing co-op within 5 years. The residents have empowered themselves and negotiate their term directly with the government. So the whole movement over the past 8 years may also make me reflect, and here are some takeaways. So the collective resistant tactics are indeed interconnected and interdependent, often used in combination with each other at different parts in time and in different place. What works in Kampung Aquarium and Kampung Marlina probably have different turnout in other kampungs. And kampung itself are not homogeneous. Many have different interests and also diverse and different idea about what should be done and how, which is sometimes leads to conflict. And the key message is it's not just about rejecting eviction, but about defending a particular way of life and also access to the city and a sense of community, as mentioned many times by Kampung Aquarium community leaders here, Ibu Darmadiani. We just want our kampung, we don't want money or compensation. The production of Kampung Susun itself has become another collective resistance towards typical top-down public housing practice in Jakarta and Indonesian cities in general. So where its resident has actively taken part in designing, producing, and managing the kampung itself. It also provides people narrative towards being modern in urban settings. Therefore, I want to say that Kampung Susun or what happened in Kampung Marlina could serve as the middling strategy for urban poor to realize their housing rights in modern time and also with dignity. So we are currently benefiting and taking advantage. You can call scaling up the success stories that happen in with our practices in kampung. So the success story allow us to have ongoing and strong advocacy towards national government. For example, the Kampung Susun and Kampung Marlina frequently become sites for trainings and visit in collaboration with the Ministry of Development Planning. Even Ministry of Development Planning developed a program in 22, which is also inspired through our activities in Kampung. So the Kampung success story also led to another ongoing collaboration with National Land Agency and currently also ongoing with Ministry of Public Works to see the form of urban agrarian reform and also housing financing for the urban poor, which is happening within the past 2 years and is ongoing collaboration. And again, Kampung Susun also inspire Kampung residents. What happened in Marlina also inspire Kampung residents that equitable modernization in the city is possible. I guess that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elisa. I hope you could hear the applause in the room for your presentation. Thank you very much for this interesting insight into Jakarta's Kampung movement. There will be some time later to discuss some of your questions and also the questions from the audience in Zoom, but I would want to give around, I want to give you some space if you have any questions of understanding. So not debate, but if you need to know something or clarify something, then this could be, this is the time. Vielleicht nochmal ganz kurz auf Deutsch. Wenn noch Verständnisfragen gerade sind, dann würde ich die kurz zulassen. Ansonsten gibt es später nochmal Zeit, um in die Diskussion zu gehen. Are there any questions on Zoom? Okay.
Ich darf Definition von Kampung, da war ich ein bisschen durcheinander. Nochmal in Deutsch? The head of problematic of Kampung was at the beginning considered kampungs as equal to slums, and I would not agree on that term because the quality of kampungs, as long as they are way being still intact, is not a slum. And of course there is a large area of overlapping between slums and kampungs. And where it comes to the definition of slums, there's of course a justification of a government to step in and say here is an unhealthy condition and an endangering condition to the population because of, for example, kampungs or slums which are built along the riversides, and with the threat of that the rivers in Jakarta might flood in flash floods and very sudden, that people are victims of such floods or other health problems or other issues where the government must step in. Well, I would consider most slums that I have visited or where I have been even working with, where I mainly not in Jakarta that much, where slums were upgraded through a similar way of community involvement with planners. So that companies were still running alive. Okay. Now, these examples I would consider very successful, but with the connotation that this is rather considered as slums which are endangering human life. So the improvement that which are brought into these companies, operational communities, is of course the story that I have.
Thank you for this question. Elisa, would you reply to the question, what is the definition of a kampung?
The question is what is the So your question is what is the definition of kampung? Is that correct?
Yes. Slums, for instance.
Yeah, we differentiate kampung and slums. So kampung, as some people call it, sometimes informal settlements, or if I use a term from Abidin Kusno is there is one in the slides. We call it he call it as a irregular settlement, de facto settlement, a settlement by the people, or whatever you call it. But slums is more like condition. The slum-like condition could also happen in the formal area. It's not necessarily embedded to kampungs. Yes, I agree. There are some kampungs they are in slum condition. I think I listened there. If I'm not mistaken, you also mentioned about the example that slums located on the river banks, right? Am I correct or not? At the same time, it could be a form of kampung, but again, they are in the slums like condition. But it doesn't mean that that kind of condition allow the government to forcibly evict them and only provide public rental flat, which is mostly located like 20 or 30 kilometers away. Actually, I didn't put it another example in this in my presentation. Actually, there are another project also by the network and how they also cut off the housing in the river banks and also make a new road made of it and then demolish all the slum by themselves, and also upgrade the street and everything by themselves without government involvement, because again they are under threat of eviction and also only deemed by the government as illegal. So I guess in this case, what the urban kampungs need or the residents in kampung needs actually first acknowledgement for the government that they live there, and then the second one that the housing solution that for them is not single solution. So so in this case, the government also have to open for many solutions and not only one, because sometimes most of the time government only say the solution is only one single solution, you have to move to public rental flat. So that kind of solution usually will rejected by the residents. So if you allow or provide change to the resident and also with the willingness to solve the agrarian conflict or agrarian problem, usually the residents, how can I say, would like to negotiate directly with the government. So I guess we always try to find the middle ground between the government and the people. So yeah, I hope it made sense or answer to your question.
We can go into the question later again, because I think as we described, there's definitely in the character of the kampung and maybe slums that people might not in Latin America, but from what I understood, it mostly on the informality and also the precarious situation of the people living. So as you said, the land rights use issue is a big issue and makes living in a precarious, and also having rights to live there and also rights in the planning of the settlement. And I'm happy to later on the question and would like to give Hannes the chance to present give us information on the question of the growth, climate change, and the multi-coding example of Munich. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me here. Should I talk in English? Maybe, yeah.
It's certainly easier, but if you prefer to speak.
No, because we just make the argument that it may be too complicated if I speak.
Excuse me, please.
Okay, then I do my best. It's not my daily business to do it in German, in English, but we manage. One slide back. Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Sharing with you the German perspective or European perspective. Of course, so different somehow. We have different densities. We don't have the informality like Jakarta. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here and to get ideas, and I present basically a project where we are focusing on the last 6 years. It's called Green City of the Future. I work on climate adaptation and climate mitigation Anastasia said in the introduction, in cities and climate adaptation. And here I want to focus mainly on climate adaptation. It's quite a crucial issue also in Germany. But I would say in countries like Indonesia, we can feel it much more, of course, but also in Germany, as the people who are here now can notice also we have climate impacts. And this year we will have, the German government is also agreeing on a climate adaptation law. And we will have a new strategy also in Germany. So it's a big issue. And also when we come to research funds, it's also a big issue that more money is going on climate adaptation solution and also nature-based solution. I will focus here very much on green infrastructure. And it means also that we will have to reshape our cities. When I look out, I can see some trees, but I can also see sealed areas, which is challenge when we have heat waves and heavy rains. So, and yeah, when I changed a little the title of the presentation, because the last years I worked with future visions, Zukunftsbilder, and I will give a short introduction on multi-coding. It means in growing cities, in climate change, we have concurrences or competition among different land use, and we have to look how can we combine various interests of land use, and that means multi-coding, that we use green space not just for cooling or for water retention, that we also see it as recreation areas and put all these functions together. That means in this way, multi-coding, and this means also that we have to bring different people and departments together who deal with these issues, environmental department, planning department, also social department. It's a new planning approach. It's not too new, but I would say it's an approach which we need more and more, that people from the various disciplines come together and share their knowledge and find collective solutions in order to be prepared for climate change in Germany and also in other countries. Yeah, and with the future visions, we can develop solutions for multi-coded areas. And when we speak about growing cities in Germany, we speak about cities like Berlin, we speak about cities in Munich, like Munich, where we focus in this project on all these metropolitan areas where we have the challenge that there's a lot of construction and the open land, which gives us cooling or place for water retention gets lost or less. And that's why the challenge or the task with the future visions is to develop pictures. How do we want to live in the future in times of growth, in times of climate change, in order to have a positive living and not just having suffering. And we can, with these future visions, we can also shape our futures. And that was the task of the project. And yeah. So that was the first small introduction to frame the presentation. And here I show you now a slide. These are some figures from Munich. I know in Jakarta we have this mega urbanization, but also in Germany we have quite some urbanization and growth figures. So in Munich it will be 40% till 2040, and at the same time we also will have a increase of summer heat days, that the temperature will rise more and more in summer, and also having tropical nights, which means that the temperature won't be below 20 degrees during nights. And especially that's a challenge for vulnerable people who don't have good insulation, who live below the roof, so we can't sleep well, and that gives also some impact on our productivity. So that's the where we start, and which will become more and more severe for the future, and that's why we need solutions to handle this. I have here a slide where you see the heat. The situation is like this, that we will have this increase of population, and that's why we need more housing. So we have to discuss, do we want to have with houses less green infrastructure, because we want also to have more parking. So here you see a picture that with a lot of parking and no trees, we have higher temperature. And with less parking and a lot of trees, the temperatures are lower. So that should be the condition that we should achieve in future. And that means that we have to keep trees as many as possible, and especially old trees. Often I learned in the past, if you cut a tree, plant 4 new ones, and then everything is fine. But it's not it's not good like this, because old trees, 50 years old trees, they have a very high climate impact, and a young tree takes 50 years to have this impact. That's why we have to discuss the issue, how we want to shape our districts. This I want to show with this slide. And there's one, and that's why it's also the question, green is not green infrastructure. We have really to differentiate between different green infrastructures. It's better to have open spaces where we have some water retention, cooling, and so on, than to have sealed areas, to have big trees than small trees, to think about facade greening, rooftop greening, in order to have really the opportunity to cool down the city. And there's one planning approach, the double inner development, or the 3 times inner development. I don't know if this is now the proper wording in English, but not to have urban sprawl, but to look that we have denser cities, in inner cities, but also to maintain and improve the green situation, and to combine also with sustainable mobility solutions, and also with social issues. And there's one publication of the German Environmental Agency on this 3 times inner development. And there's also a new movement now, approach on the European level, the new European Bauhaus, which address that we have to design cities to make them inclusive, sustainable, and livable. And I think it's quite a good approach when we think about future visions, with all the challenges of climate change, of growth, and so on. Now, it's gone, and let's get that. Meint so hier unten. Yeah, the remote control is. Next slide, please. Okay, and coming to the focus of the future visions, with this debate of different future visions, we want to activate different groups that we can shape future, and that we can shape future, and that also we can empower different actors to think about green infrastructure, to think about social aspect, technical construction aspects, and also to get advices in order how to plan future developments, how to deal with conflict of interests, and so on. And the basic question was, how can we address challenges in growing cities and climate change, as I said already. And what we did in the project, we put the question, what is our imagination of growing quarters, neighborhoods in terms of climate change? And I would say now, when I look in the audience, we will have different pictures of these neighborhoods. When I ask you, how does your neighborhood look like, and so on. And that's the interesting point, that we really can design, that we can express our imagination about this future visions of neighborhoods, and that we can start a dialogue on how do we want to live with all these challenges in order to have a positive living. And here you can see we did also illustrations in the project and narratives in order to have a better basis for dialogue. And here you can see now one future vision on green and mobility in a new settlement, where you also have water retention. There are some. There is a parking tower in order to have no parking below the surface, which is a problematic with tree growing. That's why here's a parking tower. And in the future, when we will have less individual cars, we can use it as housing or as a commercial area to have some flexibility. Also, we have here a water storage tank. So this means also this multi-coding, that we use the building not just for parking, we use it for water restoration, maybe also if there would be a garden, we can also use it for food production and so on. And the same here, also some solutions to keep the tree, to have enough space for the tree, that there's water retention, that there's a place for recreation, in order to that people can meet and so on. When we develop future vision, it's not just like we ask the question, how do you want to live? There is a lot of information everywhere. We have concepts, visions, targets, pioneers, and we can use all this work to shape these visions, to start the dialogue. I just mentioned here some the SDGs, for example, or there's the concept of the good living, water sensitive urban development, heat adaptive neighborhoods, and so on. All this concept can help us when we have the dialogue on the future visions. And this was also integrated in our work. And here I show you some pictures, real projects when I was on a research trip last year in Poland and France, that there are already many projects out there that show us that it's possible to have a different city. And this should motivate us to start the dialogue and to get rid of all the bad solutions when we develop cities. Like, for example, to have renewable energy production, or to combine, to use roofs with social places and green, or to have water storages with green. And here also with an old tree, to have green facades. And that's one challenge. Often we can't have trees because there are infrastructure below the surface. So we should think, and some cities are doing it, to remove or to relocate the infrastructure in the middle of the surface, that we can plant trees here. So we have to think, do we want to have roads, no trees, or do we have to restructure the road in order to have trees? Here, old industrial hall where we have now a park and some photovoltaic panels where energy is produced, and a wooden wooden house here to use also renewable materials. Some other concepts also to integrate animals in the city. That's a design concept, animal added design, that the animals can also have some biotopes, which is also here, combined with water retention. So no sealed areas on an urban farm here on the roof of the fair in Paris. And here it's a new parking house, not below the surface, but multi-story with a restaurant on top, some social enterprise. So also the need for mobility, for parking, combined with social interaction. So what I want to show with these pictures, and also said already, there's not one future. I like the German term Zukünfte or futures in plural. Some people are confused sometimes, but I think it's quite a good term to have the plural, because, as I said, there are many ways how the future can look like, and the same also how we achieve this future when we once agreed on a future, and we did this in the project. So I think this that's a slide with many conflicts when we use land and solutions. And for example, I just want to highlight some of it. When we use roofs, we can use it for electricity production. We can use them for food production or for recreation. And the multi-coding says that we can use it also for everything if we just have the right design. We can also install mini wind turbines. And so every individual project, we just have to look what do we want? Who are the people involved, and how is the interest, or what are their opinions about the shaping the building? And the same for public space, green infrastructure in a neighborhood. Often areas are sealed. It's argued that there have to be rescue ways, but it can be also organized in a different way. We just have to discuss it. And this, with the infrastructure and the trees, I just said already. So, we discussed in the project different scenarios. So I'll just mention one here with illustration. For a new settlement, here we have a compact settlement with exclusive green central plant, and on the other side we have a not so compact city quarter, a neighborhood with high-rise buildings and with more green space. So it's also a design point. Do we want to have compact and not so high buildings, or do we want to have higher buildings and more green space? And how is organized the social interaction here? We defined a scenario where there's a lot of inclusive places, and at the end, you are not maybe now surprised when we had the discussion with planners and building associations, it was something in between. They said we don't want to have high buildings so much because it's also technically challenging, and we want to have exclusive places, but also inclusive places. So it's the basis for discussion. And once you have this future vision, there's an interesting method. It's called backcasting. Once we have achieved the future vision, how did we achieve it? We posed the question, and we did it for Inner Yard in Munich with residents, and it looked like this. They agreed on the future vision. We would like to have it like this, and then we discussed what are more ambitious measures and what are easy to implement measures. And the result was that they started with small greenings, and this should be it's just now a showcase how we also can shape this green neighborhoods in times of climate change and growth. And then I came to my last slide. What I want to stress is that we have to start early enough and to have a holistic, consistent perspective when we speak about urban development in times of climate change and growth. We have to think together different aspects, not just urban planning, also how can we integrate the green infrastructures, social aspects, and that means to combine different perspectives, how also to have this multi-coding of surfaces and buildings, and these future visions, they can help us to shape this and to have the dialogue. And I think the dialogue is very crucial here. And once we have a joint picture, it's also easy to start something, to have little interventions, but also to start to think how can we realize these more ambitious measures, because and this one I want to stress, it shouldn't be acceptable to say it's not possible. It's what we often hear, it's problematic, it's not possible. If we say we want to go this way, we should think how we can go this way. And therefore we need dialogue for forms, and we also need structures like this rounds here where different people come together who want to shape this future. So yeah, more, I would say, methodological input maybe now with some results, but I think we also have can have a good discussion now with the very concrete input from Jakarta and now this one here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hannes. Again, I would give you the chance to ask some questions that will help you understand the matter more. Genau, wenn es jetzt gerade Verständnisfragen gibt, dann würde ich die gerne zulassen. Ansonsten gehen wir jetzt gleich in die Diskussion mit den Referentinnen. Ich bin ein bisschen unsicher, ob ich das jetzt auf Deutsch oder auf Englisch machen soll. Also auf Englisch würde es Sinn ergeben für alle Referentinnen, dass sie mich verstehen. Wie sieht es hier im Raum aus? Verstehen Sie alle Englisch? Ja, okay. Sollte es eine Person geben, die Fragen hat, vielleicht wenden Sie sich zu Ihren NachbarInnen und fragen da kurz nach, was vielleicht irgendwie genau einzelne Wörter sind. Okay, so I will continue in English then. We have heard a lot about the different situations in Jakarta and, well, not Berlin, but in Germany, and the climate adaptation and retrofitting, not just of living spaces, but also of urban spaces and the greenery. And I would like to ask you about the, so you contributed with, for the Themenheft, for the, I have a problem, thank you, for the brochure on Berlin and Jakarta. And I would want to ask you about both the differences, but also the things that both cities have in common, because we've seen different approaches to the climate adaptation in the urban spaces. Obviously, what we've heard from the Kampung movement, those are settlements that are very precarious, where people live in very in substandard housing, substandard settlements. So the modernization is a different approach than we've seen, for instance, for Germany. So in Germany, maybe other things like the greenery in the urban spaces is a big topic. But have you, in your research, found also things that connect both cities and the climate adaptation in the urban spaces? And maybe also, what can we learn from Jakarta? What can Berlin learn from Jakarta? What can Jakarta learn from Berlin?
To clarify that I didn't do much research, but I lived there and worked there. And of course, Jakarta and German cities have tremendous differences. Not only that the one country is in the tropics and has a totally different climate, but as well the sociology of those two countries are very different. And here it comes to, I think, one of the major topics that we're talking about today is the urban poor, and how can we include or create an inclusive city where poor and rich, all walks of life, somehow get together and maybe get out of poverty. We don't want to serve the urban poor in terms of that we keep them poor, but we want actually to eradicate, or at least to alleviate poverty. And there are not one solution. We cannot tomorrow find a different world where there's no poverty anymore, but we can contribute to that by ways of good examples that Ruchak is providing and other NGOs and grassroots organizations. But I'm as well convinced that planners, if they do a good job, do an integrative or an integral part of their job, where planning, as you have mentioned, not only one focused area, but should at least be integrating the many different topics like gardening or climate issues and sociological issues and so on and so forth. One of the major things that I have been working on when it comes to urban development is mobility. And I think mobility is not just the question of how do we bring people from A to B, but it has to do in the first place with urban space. And urban space or public space is something that belongs to all of us. But as it is used in Jakarta as well in Germany until now, there's slight changes. And I think the visions that both countries are sharing, at least in some heads of the authorities, leads us and the citizens as well, and all of us, towards a different picture of the future. We know all that the automotive foundation of cities is no longer our goal, and that happens as well in Jakarta or in other Indonesian cities, at least with the planners who share visions towards a more human-based planning or approach to cities than to the automotive, basically driven cities. And as we know that a car in Indonesia, for example, is only accessible or is only affordable by the rich, that there's only a small percentage that at the end uses all of the space that we all own together. Now, if we transform our cities where public space is reintroduced to the public, then it should be available to everyone. And if the poor, the rich, all walks of life have access to public space, then there is more equality and there is chances that the poor as well can easier move, because their way of movement is walking and maybe some public transport and some bicycle, which both walking and bicycle, as we know, is not a very easy way to go in Indonesia. We don't have walkways. Roads are nearly occupied from both sides, where we don't have space for walking, and bicycling is as well not where it was and hopefully will be, but so far it's not. That brings us to the fact that if public space is not accessible for the poor, they cannot move to the place where they might have a chance to work. So their chance to work is only in the very close vicinity of their kampung. And that limits, of course, the chance to get into jobs if you have only the access to very close neighborhoods. So opening up public space, banning cars from the cities is a way as well of reducing poverty, or maybe it sounds a bit abstract or a bit long fetched, but it contributes to that whole idea. And if we regard public space further, I just follow what you have just stated. A city must, of course, be re-greened, and if public space is only used for cars, then there is no way to green it because it's built by asphalt. But if we open it up, we can, of course, plant trees and not only in the public space, but as well in vertical and on rooftops, so that that contradiction between do we want to go high-rise and keep larger areas between the buildings for parks shouldn't be a contradiction, because we can go high-rise and plant the vertical structures and the rooftops, and even have void levels where we have plants and everything else. A second thing about public space is, we have mentioned it as well, is the ceiling of not only the place where a building is being constructed, but all the public in between. And that must be broken off, because we know that climate change brings harsher precipitation, and by that in flooding, and we need to unseal our cities. And what we call that is that cities become sponge cities, as a term that we use nowadays, which means that if we go extreme, that each development, each house, whether it's a compound place or it's a bigger project, needs to prove that the space they occupy takes all the precipitation and keeps it there. That's the idea of a sponge. If water is coming onto a sponge, the sponge keeps it and it doesn't run off. Because if water is running off in that tremendous amounts that we are facing in the future, then we have flash floods and other problems. And we have that not only in Indonesia, we have that in Germany. We had it, and for sure we will have it again, hopefully not so much in the future. If we can manage to get our cities unsealed and build sponge cities, we can keep water on the place and not having it run off into the rivers or into the streets. That's one aspect. I might continue later a bit about mobility and other aspects that have to do with
Thank you very much. I will definitely come back to the topic of the mobility that you talked about, but you also made a very interesting point, saying, well, first of all, one of the points you were just making is that ownership is also a big question. So it's not, if I have a building, or if I build a structure in the city, I am responsible not just for myself, but also for the public and everyone. As you said, everyone has to, like every space in the city has to do a share and to do something for a climate for the climate adaptation. So the sponge can only work if the whole city works as a sponge, or if bigger parts of the city work as a sponge. And I also like the idea of what you just said about the urban poverty being something that is definitely also a responsibility of the whole urban society. So it's not just and also the social question of urban poverty and the ecological question of who is hit hardest and which communities are hit hardest in the city is also very interesting when you look at the ownership question. So the kampung is obviously also a precarious settlement on ground that they don't necessarily own themselves. And we already talked a lot about the most affected groups and communities of people. And I would also, she works with a lot of these communities, and she tries to help the non-state actors become leaders and stakeholders in the urban transformation for more climate just and also socially just cities. And if, yes, I'm with that. I want to ask you, who are we talking about exactly, and who are you working with? So which are these actors and stakeholders that are changing the city to be climate and socially just?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And thank you very much for the presenters so far. And yeah, who do we talk about? This is a very good question, and it takes a broader perspective, I think, to answer. I think we talk about alliances of actors, of various actors. And as Elisa mentioned, it's really all about the people who are affected, and the strong belief that they have the mandate also and the right to develop their own lives, yeah, and their living conditions. I think this is key. And it's really, this is our DNA, I would say. What we always have in mind when we talk about development. At the same time, we see that we have a strong pressure, and the pressure is time. Time is a strategic factor. because we talk about climate crisis and about worsening conditions, about projections, and we talk about cities as areas that have more and more population. And Elisa mentioned the important fact that especially in the smaller cities, like up to 500,000 inhabitants, there are not so many actors thinking of the socially just and ecologically just development in Indonesia. So when we talk about actors, we talk about, of course, the people who are most concerned about their development, the urban poor, but we also talk about the city societies, because the city must work for everybody, also the well-off people. And in fact, we need everybody to contribute to a just and ecologically just city, but from different perspectives. I think this is really important. And what the great concern is also is that we talk about scaling up, we talk about good solutions, and there are so many good solutions that we know about already. Yeah. So we had this beautiful example from Elisa, the kampungs that are developing themselves and that have to overcome really so many problems to do so. And at the same time, we know that we need to upscale such developments in Jakarta, in every city in Indonesia and beyond Indonesia. And I think this is why it is really important to cooperate with governments. It can be really very difficult to cooperate with governments. But it's so important to have this in mind, that governments can have the ability to scale up. And that's actually their job to do so and to take care of the people most in need. And so I think this is one important actor. And another set of actors is, of course, science, because they can really contribute knowledge about solutions, and about how to implement solutions. And I think what we really have to acknowledge is that we know so much about solutions, and it's now really about implementing those solutions. It's the era of implementation now.
Thank you very much, Almut. I think one of your points, we can also go back to the question of mobility later, because you said obviously the stakeholders are needed to change the urban development in itself and give it a new paradigm. And maybe I can postpone this question to later, because I would also like to ask Elisa again, because we heard a lot about the process of the transformation and the organization in the kampungs, and from what I understand, it's also a democratization process in the kampungs. So it's not just about the climate retrofitting or the urban development in the informal settlements, but it's also about having a sense of community and having a political idea of community, so that they can be stakeholders and actors in the change and in the urban transformation later. And I was wondering, Elisa, if you can maybe say a couple more words on how these communities developed after the new modern housing was built. So is there still, as you said, there are some contracts and political acknowledgement of these communities, but would you also say there's still political work happening? So is this maybe also a blueprint for the democratization process that is needed to change the urban urban structures to become more climate and also socially just?
So one thing that interests me or make me hopeful after this project is not coming from the provincial government. Actually, it's coming from the national government, meaning this is the Ministry of National Planning, which make a national program based on, I can say, based on our practice. So basically, they addressing about the agrarian problem, because usually all kind of kampung upgrading or slum upgrading never address about agrarian problem. So you cannot talk about climate change, you cannot talk about climate crisis if the people there still have this agrarian problem. So the Ministry of Planning finally addressed that. So in the program, in this national program, which is launched in 2020, and we also involved in training the civil servant who participate in the program. This is a nationwide program, and also apply to, I think every year apply to like 100 local governments. So it's based on selection. So in this program, again, you have to address about the water issues, and also sanitation problem, and housing problems, and the agrarian problems. But for the housing solution, it's not a top-down solution that coming from the planner or from the government, but it only happen and approved and designed by the residents. So of course, there is still an awkward moment with the local government who usually working on the, usually have this top-down policy. So it's a transition time for them as well in order to working collaboratively with the residents. So I think that's quite promising in terms of the follow-up of our effort in Jakarta. I didn't expect that the national government pick up this how can I say, approach, or pick up these ideas that practicing in Jakarta. So yeah.
Thank you very much. I think a lot of these, well, the questions that I'm asking and also the answers that you give.
About the residents, right? Sorry, is that correct? Sorry, because yeah, sometimes it's on and off. Is this correct about the residents after the kampung, after they modernize the living condition?
Can you say that again? I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
I mean, your question is about how they, what happened with them after they modernize their living condition as well, right? Also, there are two questions in one.
Yes, if the communities after the modernization, if there is still work happening, so is this basically the end of the organizing work in the community, or are these communities still following a political project? Are they still doing political advocacy work for themselves or for other kampungs? So do you feel like there's a politicization happening also in this? Because a lot of the from the, at least also the German context, struggling with your housing situation can sometimes mean to fulfill a certain need, and then the politicization sometimes stops after that. So my question is, do these communities still act as political actors after the modernization of the kampung? Are they connected with other kampungs? Is there more organization work happening after they fulfill the need of good living environments?
Oh yeah, they are still organizing happen either in Kampung Aquarium and Kampung Marina. Again, in Kampung Marina, they still need to influence their the next residents and also the next alley. So it's so they have to scale up their own approach. Otherwise, their improvement will only benefit themselves, not the entire community. While for the Kampung Aquarium, because they are become like you can say best practice or good practice that been visiting by government staff, even other kampung as well. So they participate in influencing other kampung to also how can I say, to also accepting certain kind of modern living, in this case of vertical living. But they also explain on how you achieve that rather than accepting government proposal. So they are in active they are, they also traveling got an invitation from other kampung, for example, from nearby region or nearby other neighborhood cities. So they visit them and also invite other kampung residents to visit them, and they explain about their activities. They're also on the transition, because like I said, the building will be owned and managed by the housing cooperative. They are still under 5 years, how can I say, maybe evaluation from the provincial government before the provincial government really give the building. So now they are improving their ability in about financial. So like they try to find audit company who want to audit them for free, for example, because they want to provide proof to the government that they can manage the property, and also being transparent in terms of the managing the properties, and as well as managing their business, because it's a cooperative and also have some business as well. So yeah. So it's still ongoing process.
Much. And also maybe going back to Almut for a second, because so you're working with these the non-state actors to help them achieve their goals in the political field. And I was wondering, can you say if you are also working with people from kampungs, how concrete is this work? So can you maybe give us an insight into how can the work that Miserio does also help in this organization work and the politicization work and the democratization of the kampung?
Yes, of course. Do we work with community-based organizations in kampungs? But we, as Miserio, we do not work directly. We work through partner organizations like Rujak, yeah, or many others in Asia. So what we support is, of course, and Elisa has mentioned it, it's really networking, social action on the ground and networking, because networking is really a very important and powerful tool. Yeah, and it really assists communities to engage and to do lobby work, yeah, how Elisa also explained and described it. And what we also do is, of course, supporting lobby and advocacy work. Yeah, that is one of our domains, and we always hope to connect advocacy work done in a country and then connect it with a topic or with a policy where, for example, the German government has a role to play in a certain country. Yeah, so this is what we do. And what we really like to support as well is a cooperation beyond sectors. I think you mentioned, Anastasia, that it's all about a new paradigm, urban transformation. And it's really the idea that urban transformation needs all sorts of actors, and that we need to open urban transformation up to different actors and policy areas. For example, energy transition or mobility are key areas of work, like housing and social organizing of kampungs, for example. And this is what we support, yeah, in Jakarta, in Indonesia, but really also in other countries in Asia, where we are quite active. And for example, we at the moment, we really encourage partner organizations to make use of urban climate policies to achieve their goals, because we understand that climate finance will arrive at the local levels and can be spent. Yeah. And it's our idea that climate finance should be spent in favor of urban poor projects, and that our partners, yeah, are, for example, getting climate finance directly, yeah. But these are totally different policy and political processes. These are new processes, and we try to really facilitate partners to make use of such new processes, political processes, in their respective cities and countries. So this is an important area of my work, actually.
Thank you very much. As you said, the financing of these projects is one big topic, and obviously, if these projects are visible, so if they get well, if they have a good idea, good vision, and good communication in what they want to do, that will be also one step, or being one step ahead of the political processes. So talking to a community, talking to actors that have a certain vision of what they want to achieve in their communities, I think that's a very big part of the politicization work. And I wanted to ask Johannes both and Hans Ulrich as well about the question, how can this planning that with multi-coding, how can that maybe help also to scale up? So not just as we've seen doing a community and neighborhood based work, but do you have any idea of how this could be used also on a bigger and broader level that is needed in Jakarta? And I think one of the sectors that Hans Ulrich also said he's an expert in that needs to be rebuilt and changed, and is also contributing to the climate crisis a lot, is the mobility sector. So maybe first the question to you, Johannes, how can this multi-coding approach and also the approach of having future visions be scaled up from the neighborhood level to a higher level, and also the higher level being in certain cases mobility? So maybe also afterwards, Hans Ulrich, you can say a little bit about community-based planning processes for mobility as having a socially just mobility in the city. So maybe Johannes first.
Thank you. What I want to emphasize first, or what I like very much in the presentation of Elisa, was this passive design when we talked about climate adaptation. And because when we speak about multi-coding, we should talk about sustainable solutions and not to make the mistakes that we start now with active cooling, and where we use energy and so on. And there are funding programs for this kind of technologies. We should really look, first of all, what are the concepts that are sustainable. Here, I like very much this nature-based solutions. Ulrich mentioned the sponge city, which is really a concept how we can react to heat waves, to heavy rains, and of course, we have to bring together different stakeholders. We have to bring together not only the residents, or to have the residents with us, but to have the housing associations with us. What I learned and was very impressed in Munich, there are housing cooperatives. They are very focusing on sustainable issues, like they have rooftop gardens, they have unsealed outside spaces, they have mobility concepts, and they also integrated social housing in their concepts. So it's not just for the rich people, often like when you have this sustainable lifestyles, that they also address vulnerable groups, that they can live there also. And so I think we need a common understanding. What are the concepts that we want to multiplicate or to scale up? And then, of course, we need the governmental funding, and also on a legal scale also to have, of course, a kind of, to have the governance for these sustainable solutions. Yeah, maybe this for the moment.
And Hans Ulrich, as we said, speaking of scaling and also having a broader image of a climately just city, how do you think, or do you feel like there are some approaches that we've just heard that would help with mobility planning as well on a city level instead of just on a neighborhood level?
Yeah, mobility planning is an issue that the whole city or the city government is facing. To start that from a community level is of course difficult, because the ownership of the city, as we have mentioned before, or just the basic question, who owns the city, is so far always being answered by, I mean, some 25 years ago, it was one man who owned the city. And then there was a bit of a democratization process in Indonesia where people came up and said, we all own the city and we claim the city, we claim public space, and to empower and to encourage the citizens to regain the access to public space is, of course, one work of the many NGOs and community-based organizations, but as well planners, who should interactively get into their planning process, having as much as possible participation from the target groups with whom they're working with. Now back to the kampung, which I want to defend again, which we mentioned before already. A kampung has so many qualities, a traditional kampung, and of course I separate that from these quarters, which maybe faded into difficulties because of their location or because of mismanagement or because of whatever. But the traditional kampung is a car-free zone. I mean, that's already something that the rest of the city is not. So this is already something that is actually the vision we have today, and we didn't much recognize the last 50 years when car ownership went up and up. And kampung as well practices since the beginning urban gardening. It's by that greening the vicinity. Kampung in social issues is of course practicing gotong royong, which is kind of neighborhood support and mutual help. And by that creates an inclusion of the even more vulnerable within a relatively poor citizenship of kampungs. So there's a lot to learn from. And I'm happy that if we feel like kampungs cannot anymore being tolerated in the more and more getting denser cities, that at least there's an attempt of Ruchak in that example of reinventing the kampung. Now in a rumah susun or in multi-floor Geschosswohnungsbau, multi-floor dwellings. I'm sure it is possible. I think it's not easy because the qualities of kampungs that is mentioned are actually how they grew. And if you look into the history of kampungs, they grew out of an rural way of dwelling. I mean, they come from the villages. The migrants that coming from the countryside and migrating into the cities, phenomenon that we all are aware of, that urbanization is with such a fast pace continuing in Indonesia. And now we have, I think, 57% of urbanization of people living in the cities, and it will be more and more and more. So people coming from the rural areas, of course, bring their traditional knowledge with them, and they practice ways of building how they know, how they understand, because they do it themselves. And in gotong royong means of mutual help. They don't employ an architect, and they don't employ a construction firm, and they don't employ infrastructure providers, but they do what they know. And that makes it that there's an ownership, of course, a very strong sense of belonging to the place, to the location, and there's all these qualities. I'm sure, I'm an architect myself, that if we analyze these qualities of kampung, that we can as well transform them into an adopted or into a maybe denser even. Kampungs are quite dense, but they are more or less mostly 1 or 2 floors, and even denser because the cities must become denser. That is one request of the time, because what we see in Jakarta, which is anyway out of control these days, cities must be limited. Cities must have a border. Cities must have that urban sprawl, the periphery of the cities that just continue and move into the next cities, and at the end, whole Java is being urbanized in one big city. That is not the vision we have. So we must limit and get denser, and we must diversify. It's your topic, I think, which you brought up, that our neighborhoods must be as diversified as possible, because the commuting between one place to another, if they are not diversified, if we have, as a philosophy of urban planners maybe some 50 years ago, was not only the mobility for the cars, so the car city or the automotive city, but as well the separation between the different fields of our daily activities. So we had spaces or had areas for work, we had areas for recreation, we have areas for dwelling, we have areas for shopping, consuming, we have areas for education where the universities or schools are located. And like we have in Berlin, an area for culture, the whole area around Stabi is just for culture. Once the culture doors are closed, it's dead. We must mix all different functions of a city in the smallest areas. And there is a term, I don't know whether you're familiar with that, we sometimes as well talk about the 15-minute city. Did you hear about that? 15-minute city means that a city should, within an area which you can reach within 15 minutes, should have everything incorporated that an individual needs in his or her daily life. Of course, there is some things that you might find outside of that because you only go there once a year or once a lifetime. When you go marrying, you can go wherever and have your honeymoon. But the daily needs, work, consumption, recreation, what else did I forget? I mean, all your daily needs should be within such a very small vicinity. Then you don't need to move because you have your workspace around the corner. You have your children go to school around the corner. You have your shopping around the corner. You have your recreation in your parks, your sport activities and everything around the corner. That makes a city more livable because you don't need your car. And my vision, and I think I share that with many of you, is car-free cities. That sounds, you have mentioned as well, maybe a bit too drastic. And there's people, of course, saying, no, not possible, and we will not. But that's the ones that own cars and they don't want to give it up. A livable city will be car-free, and that will be faster than we think because it's necessary. We cannot afford to continue living in that kind of cities. Even Berlin, where we have already a bit more flowing traffic than in Jakarta, it is the demand that cars are being banned. And with that in mind, I think that idea of the 15-minute city is something that would count for Indonesia as well as for Germany, because we need the density and diversity within a very small area. That would cover maybe up to, if density is really high, up to 100,000 people, such a 15-minute city. And maybe that's too much, maybe 50,000, but 100,000 would be in the most extreme case being covered. And so why do we city of 10 million? They need different cities, and we don't move in between. Who moves in between the different places in Jakarta is the rich, because they don't mind. They want to live a bit in better areas for better air in the slopes of the mountains in Bogor and Puncak. And they don't mind that they move, even if they sit in their car for an hour, because they're driven by a chauffeur and they sit in the back and can work or sleep or have their breakfast or whatever. So it's not wasted time. Who wastes time is those that cannot afford a chauffeur. They sit on their motorbikes and travel that far because their work is too far from their dwelling. And we must not separate different functions of a city, but we must bring them together.
Thank you very much, Ulrich. I just want to stress what you said in the beginning, this traditional knowledge. I find it very interesting when we now look on Germany, what we can learn from southern countries. That's why I also stress this passive cooling. And it's the same what you said now with car-free zones or urban gardening, which are traditionally in the kampung. I think we should also do in research, but in general, look more what we did in the past and how we can integrate these concepts in our nowadays living. I was once about mobility. I was once in South Africa. I had there a project, and because we speak also about the poor, the challenge was that they often have to commute long distances in order to get to their jobs. And now we speak about 15-minute cities. I would say, okay, it's then also a luxury debate. How can we solve this challenge in order that also yeah, we can find here a future vision for this challenge about transport. Transport, I notice, is a big challenge, and the same. What I would maybe raise the question to Elisha about this 15-minute cities and having car-free zones and urban gardening and so on. Is it a Western nice vision, or is it also in Indonesia a future vision which is attractive?
Thank you very much. I would like to, after these presentations and comments, I would like to open up the discussion for the audience and also the online audience, and maybe to give you some time to think of questions that you would like to ask. I also wanted to stress that from what we've heard right now is that a lot of the visions that maybe in the German context or in the Berlin context we see as pioneering visions, as something that is maybe also just ecologically and also socially just vision for the future, are mostly born out of necessity in settlements, for instance, like the kampung settlements in Jakarta. So as you said, both of you, these ideas of the 15-minute city, of having multi-use homes or multi-use buildings, the multi-coding, as you talked about, all of these things are visions for a climate just city, but they are being implemented already in communities that have no other option than to do that. So there's limited space. They need to do some urban farming because there's maybe not enough money to buy food. So all of these things are born out of necessity, and maybe this is also a point where as European or German city planners and architects, we can learn from the experiences that people in the kampungs or people in Jakarta make. And I would also like to say that we have talked a little bit about the externalization. So obviously in Germany, there's a lot of wealth generated by the externalization of the climate crisis. And then looking at what kind of, I think Almut also already said it, the financing of these projects and all of these approaches is one of the options to help these communities flourish and help them in the democratization process. So if there's any questions or comments that you would like to make. First, the person in the back. Yes, sorry. I will not understand you, but I'm sure. Okay, but then you maybe come to the microphone.
But I want to ask saya mau tanya sama Ibu dari Rujak. Siapa namanya? Saya lupa. Ayo Elisa. Tadi dibicarakan sama Uli, ada proyek 15 menit dari rumah ke tempat kerja atau apapun. Setahu saya itu pernah diucapkan oleh Ahok waktu dia jadi gubernur. Pertanyaan saya, apakah gubernur sekarang ini yang katanya merusak semua plan yang bagus yang pernah diucapkan atau dilakukan oleh Ahok, menjalankan atau pernah mengutip kembali plan ini? Satu itu. Dan kan ik het op Duits? Is voor ooit? Is zeker een onderscheid op Jakarta of Berlin. Het hangt van de gubernur, van de regering af. Ja, we hebben ons gefreut dat Berlin endlich mal eine grüne Stadt sein sollte. Wir haben jetzt eine Regierungschance. Also jetzt ist Berlin Stadt das Auto. Das ist doch, hat der CDU überall dieses Programm gemacht oder Kampagne und dann hat er gewonnen. Genauso in Jakarta. Wir haben uns gefreut damals, dass die Gouverneur so richtig an diese Mobilität gedacht hat, was Uli gesagt hat mit 15 Minuten. Aber jetzt hat er die Regierung wechselt und hat alles kaputt gemacht. Also für mich hat doch ziemlich ganz groß mit der Macht zu tun. So, danke.
Elisa, would you like to react to this?
Yes, I think there's also another question from Johannes as well, right? Asking whether concept like 15-minute city, maybe like lower emission zone, like spawn city, whether it's only applying to the Western countries as well, and or also apply to us or understood by global South cities. Is that one of your question, right? So maybe before I answering those two questions, I would like to start with about the survey that happened in 2019. And the result of the survey, Indonesia is the most climate change denier in the world. So another survey also in 2021 by Yale, the survey also found that 88% of respondents aged of 16 to 60 years has heard the term of climate change, but only 44% could define it correctly. So 2/3 of Indonesian survey respondents say they know either a little or had never heard of climate change, compared to just 29% who said they knew either a lot or had a moderated knowledge about it. But there is a very good article from the Conversation Indonesia. They also also oversee and also criticizing the question that asked by the YouGov and also by the Yale University. Apparently, within the question, they're using some mean words like losing the forest will put Indonesia's sovereignty in jeopardy, preserving the forest is our duty as people of faith, and then many messages like protect the forest and save indigenous communities, which is important, which is also, but it's not necessarily related to urban majority who answer the question. So again, the narrative about climate change, even the solution for the climate crisis itself, never really, how can I say, close to the people, especially the one in the global South. They already have so many burden in their particular life, meaning access of water, about the problem with land and etc. But then you suddenly have this climate change or climate crisis or idea about lower emission zone and etc. And then I don't really think that it will suitable for them to understand or even try to develop or even try to come up with the solution, because they never really are using the same language that you're using now. But the good thing is, like for example, kampung, like the urban kampung, like I already said, is located inside the city, and they are a mixed-use neighborhood, it's a dense neighborhood, so somehow it's already 15-minute city. So by the time I explain what is 15-minute city for kampung residents, they already acknowledge, oh, we are already 15-minute city because we can reach the nearby train station or nearby regional station within like 5 minutes by walking. Or there is a public school located in our kampungs due to government regulation about the zoning school. So we can walk actually to that school. There is a traditional market that opened by the public, by the people already there inside the kampung, so you don't have to go to supermarket far away. So somehow since it's produced by the people and they try to also fulfill their needs, so the kampung already a 15-minute city. I give you another example how the top-down planning also give a lot of headache for the communities or for the kampung. So like 2 years after the pandemic, Jakarta government set up the first lower emission zone in Jakarta Old Town. And then in that Jakarta, unfortunately, when they set up that lower emission zone, which is probably important in terms of mobility, to clear out the vehicle out from the public space, all the good things, the government never consult to the residents who live nearby the area. So like within a year after that, a lot of complaints, and apparently even cut off some important access for the kampung residents. So that's how and then by the time they understand that this measure actually important to reduce pollution and etc., to reduce car usage, they become cynical about it. So I guess the narrative and also the solution that about the climate change need to be close to the everyday life of the people. And again, the decision also have to come out from the community itself. Otherwise, it will give a lot of headache during the implementation. And regarding the 15-minute city, whether Governor Ahok mentioned about it or not, actually, Governor Ahok never really mentioned about the 15-minute city. But if he mentioned about the better integration for public transportation, yes, actually he start the better modernized, or not really modernized, to have better integration with Transjakarta, that's the BRT system in Jakarta. Starting in 2015, and the governor after that, which is Anies Baswedan, also have a lot of integration project. So connecting MRT into BRT and also LRT. So in one particular area in CBD called Duku Atas, that's the center of the CBD. So he transformed. Governor Anies transformed one busy street into completely pedestrian plaza that connect train station, regional station, airport, MRT, Transjakarta, and now LRT system. So that's where you have this lower emission zone done correctly in that place, because one, it just connect all the transport mode and provide connection. And when he planned to do that, there is some consultation on the way as well among the public transportation user, and also with the transportation provider as well. One thing that might interest you for the Berlin context, for the opening for that new area in Duku Atas called Kendal, actually it's sponsored by the Berlin city government. So they provide mural and also art activity by the time the opening happened in 2018. So yeah, I hope it answered to your question. But to give you clarification, there is no mention about 15-minute cities during Ahok time. But he also pushed for he also start for better integration in terms of public transportation.
Thank you very much, Elisa. When we got the German translation of the question, there was also a little bit the idea whether this kind of community work does much change, because I think what the person meant also was that it is dependent on the government of the city, how the city changes, whether it goes into a green direction. And I also wanted to add what we've heard from Elisa and also from Almut, helping the communities be advocates for themselves as well, I think gives them a political presence. So having a community that is affected by climate change speak for themselves and also say for themselves what the neighborhood needs, I think they are their own pioneering actors of change, because they live in these communities, they live in the settlements, and they know what these settlements need. So I feel like both is right, probably. So the city government or the government plays a big role, but as Elisa also stressed, having these people organize in the neighborhoods and be actors of change can help also for the politicians to see them as such. There was another question in the front.
Thank you. It wasn't a question. It was just that I wanted to give a short information on the origin of the word kampung. Kampung originally meant a village community with collective land ownership. So they owned the land, and there's one village, and that is what kampung originally meant. And then they moved to the cities or whatever else, and they still are a social complex. So they are they are still socially, connected with each other. So it's more than just the neighborhood. That's what I wanted to explain. So now, of course, it's no longer the collective land ownership because they are in the cities and things like that. But originally, it was in the agricultural land ownership in the villages.
Thank you very much for this interesting insight. I do think that it helps make a better idea of what the social cohesion also is and the importance of it. We have two questions from Zoom.
Yeah, the question from Almuth, and it's following up on this theme, are what are concrete suggestions to scale up from good examples? And also what could be some new strategies to commit governments to take up good examples and adjust their policies accordingly? The second question is partly a comment. Could another important argument for climate-friendly cities be that it would significantly reduce health costs? Heat, pollution, and waste certainly cause a lot of problems, no matter whether you are rich or poor.
Thank you very much. Almut, would you like to say your question again and maybe give a little bit of the insight into what you were thinking, what you were wondering, and who you would like to address this question to?
Yeah, I would. I thought of perhaps we can collect some ideas. Yeah, how we can make governments responsible also to take up good examples that are so necessary to advance development in favor of the most vulnerable. And this is really what I wonder about a lot, how this can happen. Yeah. And what would we expect from government? How should they respond to such good examples? I think we have the answer. We want the government to take it up, but they don't do it. So what can we do? Yeah, what are civil society responses to the non-scaling by government? That would be really my question, and I would like to address it to the two presenters, of course, but also to other peoples that are present to collect some ideas, because I think we need to scale up. Yeah.
So question for two presenter, right? So Johannes, do you want to take the first one or the first round, and then I'm second, or I can take the first one? Because we are quite lucky when we are quite first the strategy on how we scale up and make the government listen, or maybe not really listen, but have a dialogue with us, because it's important to have dialogue. It's not important to have them listen to us, but it's important to make a dialogue with the government. So how to start a dialogue with government? First, we have to build a coalition, meaning sometimes for government, as many people as possible, make them acknowledge us. So that's why we have a coalition with other organizations, for example, with ARCOM, that's similar. That's a similar organization like us, but based in Yogyakarta. And also, we even broader our collaboration with Habitat for Humanity. That's more formal. For example, not really for more international name. And then we have a relentless discussion and dialogue with all kind of ministries. So it have to be ongoing discussion and dialogue, and providing some good example, workable, a possible solution and not working solution is also important for government, because they also need help, not really help. They also need to get inspiration that other means can be possible to solve their problem. And another thing, we also try to use their language as well. So we learn how to use their language and how to use their term when we have this discussion or dialogue with them. So I think those two are, how can I say, those two are important strategy that help us in advocating Ministry of Planning and also Ministry of Public Works until today. Yeah, I hope it answered to your question.
Okay, we had here some technical problems. We could hear you. Thank you very much. I just mentioned that certain topics like climate adaptation, climate mitigation, of course, they are in the political debate, of course, and we started with a very ambitious government, but now because of other issues, these topics are not so the hot topics anymore. And I would say we have it in the niche, but not in the mainstream. And now I want to give just one example, the housing issue in Germany, where it's now argued we have to build a lot of new houses. But I just spoke last week to a politician on the municipal level, and she said, in Munich, and she said, what she can see is not a scarcity of space. It's just not equal distribution of space. And we should get rid of the idea we have to build, and we have to look more on the what is already there and how we can use the space. And for sure, we need here a change in the building mentality. And when we speak, for example, about nature-based solution, we have these governmental programs, and we have now more climate adaptation managers and concepts in municipalities. But to some extent, I still have the impression often it's a niche, and the mainstream is the commercial building sector, and they want to of course, to make money and profit, and their civil society is, I think, very important. And when we speak about climate adaptation, it's not so often that when we speak about technical solutions, to have equally the social dimension, and that we have to strengthen social capital. And I just can say now in Berlin, we have many initiatives like maybe comparable to Kampung. I just thank you also very much for giving more insights. In my free time, I'm also involved in community garden activities, and we were in discussion with the Bezirks administration, and it's quite hard. But I think we have to make the debates. It's a learning. It's a lot of learning also within administration, within society, I would say. And we have to keep the topics hot and to have the dialogue and to intensify dialogue in order to have the upscaling. That was the question, because I think the ideas are there, and there are some funding, and but it's not enough. We need more regulation from the government, and we also have to have with outside the bubble also the communication with people who are following more the concept of we have to build more because there's a deficit in housing and so on.
Thanks to both of you, Elisa and Johannes. And I would like to pose the second question that was being asked, which regarded the framing of the problem. So whether climate adaptation or climate just city can also be framed as something that will smaller the health costs. So I would like to give this question to both Almut and Elisa, maybe to speak from the Indonesian perspective, both for the organizations that you work with, Almut, but also Elisa. Is the health cost or the question of health any question that is being asked in the urban policies or in the urban development discourses in Indonesia?
Elisa, please go ahead.
For the certain issue, for example, issues like pollution, yes, the discussion about health always come out. So that's why there is a citizen lawsuit that happened about the air pollution in Jakarta. That's one of the concern is because of the health concern. But some people, again, not all people can find a relation between, for example, better mobility with better health, for example. So just like this, because, for example, even within the government, for example, in 2020, the provincial government in Jakarta just set up a bicycle lane. They come up with this, how can I say, ambitious bicycle lane, like the one in Paris, you know, like 150 kilometers cycling lane and etc. They really constructed over the past 3 years. And the new governor, which is like, he took the office in 2020, he decided to stop and even how can I say, he even scrapped the budget, reduced the budget, and some of the bicycle lane even transformed into ordinary road. So the console in this case, it's also indicating that not only the citizen, but also sometimes the government cannot really make a relation between correlation between certain issues in urban, in this case, for example, mobility to health. So yeah, so it's really depend in what topics and whether it's also discussed in the or also implement or close to the daily life. So yeah.
May I add? Yeah, I think air pollution, for example, could be a very good entry point for discussion, because air pollution is affecting everybody, but differently, of course. Now I cannot talk about Indonesia specifically, but I would like to refer to Delhi, for example, in India, yeah, where it's the most polluted city of the world. And people lose 10 years of their life because of the air pollution. But of course, people who are wealthy, who are better off, they can buy purifiers and they can still enjoy better air inside, whereas urban poor need to work outside and can never afford purifiers. This is why we see a difference when we talk about air pollution. And nevertheless, I think that health is a very good entry point into transformative discussions, because everybody wants to be healthy. And so we of course, we have to differentiate between rich and poor people and their different capacities and different perspectives. But I think it's a very good entry point, for example, in relating mobility issues to health. And this is something civil society organizations can take up, for example, saying, okay, there is a reason for this, for air pollution, and individual mobility based on engines has an important contribution to air pollution. I think this could be a major lever for the discussion. And I think it's what was mentioned before, it's so important to create a narrative for such thinking. and to have examples present and to just do the connection. If it is not done by the communities, it can be explained to communities. I know the figure from Jakarta that 60% of people living in Jakarta spend a lot of budget on medicines against coughing, and because which is due to air pollution. So I think there is a direct link. Of course, we can analyze it, and then the question is, okay, how can we talk about it, and how can we make it a tool, a narrative for a different discussion on mobility, for example, on a better mobility that is not based on fossil fuels. Yeah.
Thank you very much. There's another question. Would you like the microphone? So I hear you.
Yes, thank you for the very interesting insights from all of you. I have a question regarding mobility in Jakarta because I have never been there. I spent some years in India and have seen other Asian cities. So how does mobility work in Jakarta nowadays? And what modes of transportation are usually used by whom? And is it a rather shared space kind of place, or is there separation? Is it a rather, aggressive mode of getting through the roads, or is it more collaborative? Just to have a picture. Are there auto rickshaws, or are there other ways of going around? And what role does this bicycle play? And what was the role in the past, maybe?
Hans-Ulrich, would you like to reply?
Maybe not the very actual situation because I haven't been in Jakarta the last 5 years, but I don't think it had tremendously changed. The access to mobility, as I mentioned before already, is very separated between the different ways of life because the very poor cannot afford any paid mobility, so they cannot even afford a bus or a motor rickshaw or things like that. The not that poor do use the buses, and there is a vast bus network, but they are part of the congestion and they get you stuck in traffic for sometimes hours. And the rich, as I mentioned, they have, of course, access to anything they want. And in the extremist cases, they have their SUVs with the driver and can use the time to work in the background in the air-conditioned coach and use a lot of gasoline and pollute the cities even more. So there is a very big gap between the differences, which is not as extreme in Germany as I would tell to the people that haven't been here. Where as well, of course, the rich have cars and the poorer use the public transport, but there's as well others that use each other mode of transport of the others. The congestion is, of course, a big problem. There has been a bit of an improvement in terms of that there is an underground now, but it's only one line. And a city of 10 million or the whole agglomeration space of Greater Jakarta is even 30 million. A one line, of course, doesn't solve the problem. We know networks in Delhi or in London or in Berlin that only at a certain point reach a capacity where it makes sense. Because if you need to get a private vehicle to get to the station and then drive or have the transport for one line to the in station or to some stations in between, and then you need again an individual mode of transport to get to your destination, it doesn't make so much sense. So it's not really helping the situation. Jakarta would, of course, need a vast network to carry or to transport millions of people that commute every day. And that is not yet there. There is, of course, some plans, but it's very timid and development goes faster than the realization of those visions or of those plans. Yeah, that's buses. Yeah, there's a vast network of buses. A BRT system is installed since, I think, 15 years or more. and 20 maybe. The Transjakarta. There is regional trains because people commute from the vicinity, from far away areas, which are used by millions. I think there's 1 million commuters from the south getting into Jakarta every day. And then there's some other informal ways of, there's motorbike taxis, for example, which are used a lot. I think that's similar to India. Okay, that's the picture I still have in mind from my years of Jakarta.
Thank you. Elisa, do you think that fits, or has it changed in the last 5 years?
Yes, actually, there's a lot of change in the past, I can say 5 years or 10 years. So we have to see Jakarta as two different things. One, Jakarta as one province, which is like 650 square kilometer. Then Greater Jakarta. There is a lot of change in Jakarta itself, but not much in Greater Jakarta. So Greater Jakarta probably like Berlin and Brandenburg. So Berlin is for Jakarta and Brandenburg, is that correct, right? Another province next to Berlin, which is the Greater Jakarta. For Greater Jakarta consists many cities, and those cities actually didn't do their homework. They don't provide any public transportation. So every people who still commute to Jakarta, meaning there are like 2.5 to 3 million people who still commute to Jakarta, to the inner city of Jakarta. So they have to use either regional train or cars or motorcycle. But then regional train only can take maximum 1 million people per day. So you have these 3 million commuters, but only 1 million people can take the train. Then the rest have to take either motorcycle or bus system or the car or cars. So that's why the congestion is still there. But for Jakarta itself, there's a lot of improvement starting in 2015 to around 2015 to 2014. Maybe even before that, like maybe starting in 2012 when the governor Fauzi-Bowo finally start the construction of MRT Jakarta, and then lead to also expanding of bus rapid transportation system, BRT, which is Transjakarta. Now Transjakarta is the longest BRT system in the world. And all the governor always try to improve the better connectivity in the city. So even the public transportation user in 2010 is only 2%, but when our statistic agencies have this commuter survey in 2019, then and the number become 10%. So at least it progressively improved despite having all these motorcycle and cars still dominating the city. For Jakarta itself, because of the BRT, now we have the LRT system, which is connecting to the neighborhood cities, like total is like 30 kilometers. And then MRT system, of course, with regional system, 80% of the area in Jakarta, actually, you can access to that network on by walking, only within 400 or 500 meters. But then again, the problem is Jakarta doesn't really have any policy to restrict car or motorcycle usage. So that's why people still incentivized to use motorcycle or cars, even the petrol is so cheap. So that's another problem which is hinder the public transportation user. So the last time I drive actually like 3 years ago. Now actually I'm mostly using either walking, cycling, or taking train or BRT, because it's so easy, and you even only use one car to go inside the city. So actually I wrote issues about urban mobility in Jakarta for Fredrik Ebert Stiftung. So that's another foundation, I guess. So I can send you the link so you can see what kind of progression that happened in Jakarta and what make mobility still become a problem in Jakarta, like for example that car usage, all the motorcycle and etc. So I will send the link in the chat here.
Thank you very much, Elisa. And I also wanted to add, we have talked a little bit about it, but it's a big issue that a lot of the infrastructure that is being built in Jakarta, but also in the rest of the world, is usually not infrastructure that would be seen as green, but from a capitalist perspective and point of view, building a motorway is more feasible than channeling the finances and the possible help into the neighborhoods that would then maybe create a neighborhood that is both just ecologically, but also socially, as we have seen that some neighborhoods maybe don't even need to connect, or they don't feel the need to connect to the big motorway. Maybe having a connection to the train station is the best and the most practicable in these environments. So I wanted to pose that. There's one more question here that I would give some space to, and then I would ask the presenters to give us a last statement maybe on, but yes, I will introduce that. So, question.
Hello, my name is Taslo Perlman. I study architecture at the Technical University of Berlin. And I'm also doing my bachelor thesis right now about transforming of industry structures in the more rural area in Brandenburg and Mecklenburg-Vorpommern. But I wanted to ask something and in the same time to point out a problem and maybe a solution for something I see in the Kampung typology, I would say. Because it is its own typology, if you could call that, like within the social and the structural and architectural structure of this building format. But I think what is really important to see for the future is because since I'm studying architecture, I'm more interested in architecture than in urban planning. What are the actual building matters and how is on a construction level, how are these buildings built? Because if you just plan a building on a social scale and you want to incorporate everybody and plan everything, then often I see, and this is also what we learned at the Natural Building Lab at TU Berlin, that often what happens is that you end up with concrete like this. Like you have like concrete plates, concrete columns and everything. And I know that in Germany there's
could you go a bit shorter to your question?
I'm sorry. Like the more or less perfect building height is about 4 or 5 stories, like the Berlin Blockrandbebauung. And I wanted to ask whether there's also a goal or a vision for these Kampung projects of a building height, and also how are they constructed? So what are the materials they're constructed with, and are there any material economic chains to that? So how you resource them, because I'm sure they're different than here, probably more maybe bamboos incorporated, less concrete, but also less isolation. How is there a plan, a economic and an actual architectural plan for these typologies?
Briefly, because it's a very complex question you posed, we could talk about it for hours. But as I'm an architect as well, who has studied at the Technical University as yours, I just try to give a little a short answer. It's not so much different building materials to what we have here. There's concrete, too much, and being used in the first place, bricks. Timber is, of course, available in Indonesia a lot, although the forests are shrinking, and the use of timber as well is something that gives us a headache. But it is, bamboo is in the cities nearly not used except of separating walls. In the kampungs, you still have it, but not to a big extent. What's the problem is that it's a vicious circle. The more we're building in a not climate just way, not about climate change issues, but for the interior, the microclimate of a building, the more we neglected that for many decades, the more it became necessary to air condition your house. Traditionally, of course, before air conditioning there, people in Indonesia lived very well and comfortably without air condition because the cities were much cooler. And the heating up of cities like Jakarta is, I mean, has many factors why it is getting so extremely hot. Of course, the building materials in the first place, the sealing of roads and the use of energy, the cars and transport means, and of course, industry and the many factors that we have here as well. But the problem is that a tropical city heating up gives more headaches than a cold city like Berlin heating up. Now, an answer to that, yes, it is possible to build without air conditioning, an intelligent and proper way of having, in the first place, good ventilation, that's in shading. So it's just these two main factors. There are other factors, but the main factors is good shading devices, that you don't have solar gain in your building and you do have a good ventilation. But having air temperatures outside of your building that is extremely hot and polluted, of course, many people tend to say, I cannot stand it, or my health is too endangered that they do air condition their houses. Other reasons for that is not only the heat, the humidity, and it is well the insects, the mosquitoes and everything that an air condition would maybe prevent or at least reduce. But we can go into details of that.
Thank you. I would like to do a last round for all of the presenters with maybe your, well, I would like to give you a question to maybe formulate a last statement. So we've talked a lot about the bottom-up organization of the urban transformation, and we looked at all of the options and also the problems that come with it. But what would you say what are the main factors to make it possible for a bottom-up transformation, urban transformation, to both an ecologically but also a socially just city? And maybe we can start with Elisa, and maybe you can keep it brief because we have 5 minutes for all of you.
Sorry, I lost you in the last sentence. Can you repeat in very short one? Sorry.
Yes, sorry. The last sentence was, if you could please keep it brief, because
I mean the question. Sorry, because I suddenly the connection dropped.
The question is, what, from your point of view, is what are the factors that make an urban transformation bottom up possible? What do we need? What do these communities need to transform the urban environment into a socially but also ecologically just city?
I think one over the past maybe 8 years or 10 years that I worked with urban poor in kampung, two things that very important in order to keep discussion going. One is acknowledgement for their problem and also their contribution, which is which is quite difficult in relation with government. So that's, you need to acknowledge their problem and also their solution as well. So and another thing, this is more like technical thing, addressing the agrarian problem. Otherwise, you cannot do bottom up without. You cannot do bottom up. You cannot do climate change adaptation or without really addressing the agrarian problem that mostly happen in the urban poor and also in vulnerable area. Yeah.
The bottom up.
Sorry, I also didn't hear you.
Apparently, sorry, it wasn't audible. I was asking Almut for your last statement as well. The question is again, what, from your point of view, what are the factors that make an urban transformation possible from the bottom up?
Yeah, it's the realization that it is really necessary to transform, first of all, and also the acceptance of different stakeholders that can contribute, as Elisa pointed out, and also the acceptance that time is a strategic factor when we talk about urban transformation, so that it needs to happen now, and that we really concentrate on urban transformation and try to see urban life as the future, because that's the reality according to the projections, and try to make everything possible to have a good urban future, and see cities as levers to contribute to a good life also beyond the city borders. Because if cities and city societies are resource efficient, they have a positive impact on the countryside as well. But that's a total paradigm shift to what we have at the moment. But we need to work on this paradigm shift.
Thank you very much. Johannes?
Yeah, I think that visions, having dialogue on visions can help to have urban transformation. I am aware that visions are often abstract, and we need more to discuss about measures. It's more touchable, and we have to speak about all this good and best practice, and to how to look how we can scale it up, and there also to have the dialogue outside the bubbles. And when we talk about visions, they should be realistic. Of course, we can speak also about utopia, but that's sometimes frustrating. Yeah.
Thank you. Hans-Ulrich, do you have also a viewpoint?
Yeah. Utopia starts tomorrow. So I think we really have to hurry up and get things done. I would say one key point would be empowerment. Empowerment is for the citizens, enables citizens to put pressure to the government. The government is, I think, more aware than we think, although we don't see much action or not fast enough action. But I worked with Bapinas, and Bapinas was mentioned as well today by Elisa as one of the maybe more progressive ministries compared to many others with the agrarian reform or agrarian legislation, and found partners in Bapinas that are very aware of what's going on and where we have to go, or the visions we are sharing. And I think we have very similar visions in Berlin and Jakarta and Surabaya and other cities in the world. To achieve these needs the cooperation with the public and with the citizens. And if they are not aware and not really ready to give up some habits as we all have difficulties to give up, then the government doesn't act, because they act on the demand of the public, because they want to be popular. And the public, the citizens must put pressure, and pressure is being done by empowerment of the citizens. And that's why we need NGOs like Ruchak and the many others, and we need education, formal as well as informal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I don't know how you are feeling, but I'm definitely tired from all of the different viewpoints, and I've had the great task, but also the very interesting task to combine all of these viewpoints for this event. Thank you very much to Watch Indonesia and Jan TG for organizing all of this, and all of the other people that helped organize and make this possible, and care for the Zoom audience, and also care for the equipment, so that we can talk to each other over the globe. And again, I think I'm hoping that all of the people who presented today are also happy to talk to you and to be addressed again for questions that you have regarding their field, because we could give you a little bit of an insight into what all of these people and organizations are doing. But as I'm sure you know, their work is very broad and very big, and bigger than what we could present today. So please feel free to maybe ask Janti, Watch Indonesia, or maybe even contact the presenters directly. And I hope you learned a little bit. I definitely learned a lot today, and I hope you have a great night. Thank you all for being here, and all of the people who are presenting. Thank you for your presentations and your work doing. Thank you.